After all.
You are listening to Radical Sacred, a podcast centered around spirituality, nature, and connection.
I'm Phil Dickey, pastor, eco-spiritualist, activist, friend of trees, and a small-town Missourian living in the heart of Dallas.
And I'm Jenny Mislin, spiritual director, teacher, seeker, bird watcher, and a homesick Texan living in France.
Join us now as we live the questions, learn from open-hearted conversations, and explore our own deep and sacred roots.
100 Love Sonnets by Pablo Neruda. I don't love you as if you were a rose of salt, topaz, or arrow of carnations that propagate fire. I love you as one loves certain obscure things, secretly between the shadow and the soul. I love you as a plant that doesn't bloom, but carries the light of those flowers, hidden within itself, and thanks to your love, the tight aroma that arose from the earth lives dimly in my body. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you directly without problems or pride. I love you like this because I don't know any other way to love, except in this form in which I am not, nor are you, so close that your hand upon my chest is mine, so close that your eyes close with my dreams. Amen.
I love that poem. When I first met my partner, who's now been my spouse for like 11 years, he put that poem on my refrigerator. And I haven't heard it since. So that was
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
personal. That really got me.
Yeah.
Well, that feels like a
sweet.
beautiful synchronicity.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, friends, welcome to Radical Sacred. The voice that you just heard was Erica Smith, lover of Pablo Neruda as well, and this poem. And just brief introduction here. Erica is an award-winning and internationally recognized sex educator whose main area of focus is working with folks who've left high-control religions. Wouldn't know a thing about that whatsoever. So that's great. In 2019, Erica developed the Purity Culture Dropout program to help people learn all of about sex ed they miss growing up in purity culture, and under the PCD, right, Purity Culture Dropout name, Erica offers intensive individual work, a private community for sex ed and purity culture healing, support groups focusing on LGBTQ plus identity and divorce, webinars, one-day intensives, and more. And for the majority of her career, she's provided comprehensive sex education, HIV prevention services, and support to young women and LGBTQ youth detained in Philadelphia's juvenile justice system. Dear God, that's a lot to swallow right there. That's a lot to deal with. She's here today because she has a new book out called the Purity Culture Recovery Guide, which we definitely want to hear. And Jenny's holding up, if you're not watching the video, Jenny's holding up the book. And in addition to women and youth, I also saw that you're now doing groups with men too, which I really want to dive into as well.
Yes,
So
it just began this week, so I have plenty to share about that.
Well, introduce yourself, and then I'm going to point of personal privilege because I'm so curious about this. We're meant to start there, but go ahead. If you have other things by way of introduction, I'd love to hear it.
I think you covered like the finer points of my career. Other things I would say is that I'm based in Philadelphia, but my work is virtual. So I work with people really all over the world. And I have been a sex educator for my whole career, but it was only in like the last 7 years that I've very specifically focused on the needs of people coming out of high control religion. So yeah, just a little more.
Okay, I'll wait for my men thing. We'll get to there. We'll get there. Why sex education? What really led you to this, and then what was the turn then to high control religion?
So I feel like there is definitely a story here, and I first and foremost, I did not grow up in a high control religion. My household, my family is what I call casually Christian, where we celebrated all the Christian holidays, but in a very commercialized way. I went to church a handful of times, like on Christmas Eve.
CEO Christians, Christmas, Easter, and other special occasions?
Yeah, but we didn't even do the E and the other.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Fair enough.
So my relationship to God was always like, oh yeah, God. I didn't understand what the term God fearing meant because I didn't grow up with the fear of God. It was just like God's in heaven and that's where the old people go when they die, and only really, really bad people like murderers go to hell. That was my understanding of God as a kid. So all that to say, how I got into sex education, I would go back to, I have always been a feminist, even as like a kid. I was just very interested in the issues facing women and girls and the inequality that I perceived. And I grew up in a very small rural town. I was a teen in the 90s, and I was very into like feminist punk. That was like those politics. That was what I was into. In college, I majored in women's studies. At the time, that's what it was called. Now it's, those programs are usually called like women, gender, and sexuality studies. But I realized when I was doing that academic work as an undergrad that I was most interested in issues that had to do with health and wellness and sexuality. So, nobody grows up saying I'm going to be a sex educator, and especially not in the 90s in middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. But that's just kind of how things unfolded. And my first job out of college was working at a reproductive health clinic, which was an abortion clinic. And I was an educator and counselor for the patients. And after that work, I moved to Philadelphia and I got a master's degree in human sexuality education. So it's kind of like things just unfolded that way. And all during that time, I was able to observe how harmed people were when they didn't have basic information about their bodies and when they were surrounded in like silence and fear. And I was also observing the religious right and their influence on this information. And that, I feel like I started to understand that when I was in college, but then working in an abortion clinic, I really saw it. We had protesters, this is like a throwback, but there used to be this, like, I would call them like a domestic terrorist group called the Army of God. And they would threaten clinics, including ours. And I would get patients in the clinic who would say, like, I'm a really religious person and my church doesn't believe in this, but I have no other choice. And they were like grappling with so much shame. And then a few years later, when I was working in programs that were funded by HIV money, like HIV prevention money, we started getting funding cuts because all of that money was being funneled to abstinence only. Those were the years of George W. Bush. So I'm seeing all this as a sexuality professional and being, like, they're messing it all up. Like, they're taking all of the money going to evidence-based comprehensive sex ed and sending it to abstinence only, which we have longitudinal studies showing that it doesn't have a measured effect on young people's behavior. So, I always watched this stuff happening from the outside, but it wasn't until about 2018 that I started to really hear voices of people that had been raised within those religious communities. So I'd say when Linda K. Klein published the book Pure, I read it and I was like, I felt really, I don't know, it was like this light bulb moment. Like, these folks need specialized sex education, sex education that understands the messaging they were raised with, the fear that was injected into every single facet of sexuality, and sex ed that is not based in fear or religion. So that's the Cliff's Notes of how I got to this.
That's such a lovely unfolding. So thank you for sharing that with us. I love that.
Thank you.
We just surpassed 100 episodes. We're at like 102 or 103. And I went back through and looked at our docket of episodes, and you're our 7th episode on purity culture.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, not surprised.
Yeah.
There's back always.
Yes. We, both had our own weird experiences with purity culture. I was kind of raised in it, and the True Love Waits thing in the 90s. Like, I signed the card in front of the church and did all the things, and Phil experienced it in college. And so it really has had some wild and profound effects, I think, on both of us, which is why we just keep talking about it. And now we're both raising teenagers and trying to hand them something healthy and shame-free and hopeful and like all the best things. So I say all that. Will you tell us in your terms what purity culture is and why it's so nefarious?
Yeah. Oh, this is a great question. And the longer I've been doing this specific work, I feel like the more I have zoomed out to like really observe what it is and how it's affected people. I always define it as a very rigid system of like rules and guidelines around sexuality, sexual behavior, and gender. And you will find it in the fundamentalist versions of every religion. But when we're talking about purity culture, most of the time, we're talking about the American evangelical like movement of the 90s that had a whole like industry, and it was supposed to be cool, and there were pledges and balls and rings and passport to purity, like all of these things. And it was launched by the True Love Waits movement, and there were figureheads like Joshua Harris, etc. So that's how I define it, like if somebody who doesn't know anything about purity culture asks me. And I would describe it as, if you could find a way to inject fear into every single aspect of human sexuality, that's what I see purity culture as. I always tell my clients, like, nothing about human sexuality surprises me because I've been studying it for so long and working in this area for so long. So a person could tell me, yeah, I'm into XYZ, and I'm not going to blink because I'm like, yeah, I've heard that before. But when people tell me the things that they heard about sex from their youth pastors or their youth groups or their church communities, I can't hide my shock, because I'm like, they really figured out a way to make every single aspect of what I consider a really natural, healthy part of being a human into something to be anxious about, paranoid about, hyper vigilant about. And it's, you know, supposedly all in the name of this is what God wants, but it's all so many of the principles are just against how human sexuality actually functions in a healthy person.
But have you found that's part of it though, right? Is there's like well, that's the carnal aspect of who we are, right? And like that's the part that we have to disassociate ourselves from as like a badge of honor almost, you know?
Yeah.
Until, well, then once you get married, then it's like supposed to flip some kind of switch or something like that. And then it's all like, you know, laid on the street, but a freak in the bed kind of thing. Yeah.
Been let into the secret and everything's supposed to be great.
And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's not what you're finding with people that you work with.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, I mean, I have worked with people from age, 20 to age 70 who were getting these messages about sexuality, and the shame and fear has a way of getting into places that it's really hard to get it out of.
Yeah, can you expound a little more on like some of the, I don't know if there may not be side effects, right? Like just the damage that's being done based on this. I'll call it a theology, but it's a really terrible one, right? Like it's a bad theology.
Yeah.
I think my preference.
I hear one of the things that makes me so angry. I mean, there's a lot of things about these teachings that I just can't believe, but when I hear people, they become like really, really afraid of their own attraction, really, really afraid of their own desire. And this might be like way after they've deconstructed their religious beliefs, or maybe they've settled into like a different kind of spirituality, but will have so much trouble dating because they have come to associate being attracted to someone with disrespecting them. and have come to associate others finding them attractive as something untrustworthy and something that they can't quite be okay with, because they were taught that if someone desires you, they don't respect you as a person, or they don't respect you as like a fully human being. So that's one of them. People being really afraid of how to express their interest to another person in a respectful way, because again, so much fear was given to this topic. Like, you're going to pull other people into sin, or you're going to cause your brothers in Christ to stumble, all of these things, or you're going to like ruin this girl's life if you have sex with her, all this stuff. So it really sets people up. Dating is hard enough, not being raised in purity culture. Dating is rough. And it's like this creates an extra layer of things to work through when people are trying to just put themselves out there. And yeah, I probably just rambled, but that's really one of the big ones, is like a fear of your own desire, fear of your own attraction, and then a fear of others' attraction to you.
Geez, that's good. That's so good. And I think, every time I think I've unfolded all the way from purity culture, I'm like, I'm 45, I'm cool. Like, I've done a lot of work around stuff. I've been in therapy, I've done the things. Other layers of it just get revealed to me, because you're right, it's not just sex, it's attraction, it's body image stuff, it's the clothes you wear, it's the way you present yourself, it's just a many layered thing. Will you talk to us about how it seeps into kind of every aspect of your life?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
So, when I work with people, I do individual work with people and I also do group work with people, but I hear stories that really aren't just limited to, is my sexual behavior wrong? But it can make people feel like they are wrong. They are the wrong thing. And I think this is a larger, like, depending on the religion you were raised in, like being told that you were nothing without Jesus and that you're inherently sinful and bad. Like that's not going to be a chill thing to like get over. But that is the kind of thing that often accompanies these kind of purity culture teachings. And it really depends on the version or the flavor of purity culture that you got. Like, I work with a lot of former Catholics or people that were raised in Catholic households, and their version of purity culture isn't quite as deep as some of the people that I talk to who were raised in, like, I don't know, like independent fundamentalist Baptist. For some reason, that denomination keeps, like, I've worked with a lot of people that came from IFB backgrounds, but that one just keeps popping up in the last few days as like one of the most harmful. One of the ones that teaches the most harmful theology. But I feel like I'm drifting. I apologize. If you need to edit me in any way, I'm sure you do that in post-production.
No editing. We're just straight to it here. This is all raw. This is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just limited to sexuality and is my sexual behavior okay, but it's really become like, am I okay? Am I normal? Is the way I think normal? Is the way I look normal? Is my body normal? Or the things I want normal? One of my friends who's also a sexuality educator and professor, we were talking recently about how when people ask us questions about sex, what they're actually asking underneath is, am I normal? Am I lovable? Am I safe? Am I seen? And these are the things that I think purity culture deeply affects people's ability to feel like you are worthy of love, no matter what your sexual, who you had sex with or what you think about in your private moments. It's like it all boils down to those things. And purity culture, my experience as a professional working in this area, does so deeply affect people's ability to feel like they are worthy of love, connection, care. And I get really angry because I think one of the most explicit teachings is like, if you mess up, if you do these things, you're not going to find a future spouse. You're not going to find a future partner. So there's like not a subtle but very overt message that you will be unloved if you fuck this up. And I think that is one of the cruelest teachings.
Oh, so what's this? Maybe this is getting a little bit into the dropout program, right? Purity culture dropout program, but like somebody who comes to you with that feeling, right? That sense of shame that has been placed on them. And maybe there's room for a conversation also about like guilt versus shame in the midst of all of this. But what are the steps you start to take with people in the midst of that to start to bring them back from that place?
There are a few things that I may start with, but if I'm working with a person one-on-one, one of the first things I do is I invite them to share details about their lives and their sexual history. And when I say sexual history, I don't mean like, tell me who you've had sex with. It's more like, what's your first memory of your body? What's your first memory of somebody giving you a message about your body? What was your relationship to nudity in your home? Or what was what happened when you got your first period? If I'm working with someone that gets a period, like I like to sort of lay out their life, like sexual history involves all of those aspects, and sort of take a look at, when you were this age, somebody said this to you about your body, or somebody gave you this message about having a crush on another kid. And then I'll share with them, so do you like, here's some research backed information. It's actually like a really healthy and common thing for a child that age to do XYZ. You didn't know that, and your parents might not have known that, but this is it, and that often comes up with topics like masturbation. And like, it's just a incredibly, and this is my opinion, but also sexuality research, like it's a very common human practice. And so I share things like that, but I also really give people the opportunity to think about their own values when it comes to this stuff. Because I feel like, when you're raised with purity culture values around you, nobody asks you for your input. It's just like, this is it, this is right, and you're going to follow these rules and guidelines. So one of the things I did, it's all through this book, but I created like a sexual values workbook full of exercises to ask people, like, do you personally believe that sex is only okay between like two married heterosexual people? What does that value bring up for you? How do you feel about it? Is this something that you're trying to live out in your life? And I really love when people get asked these questions and they've been like, I've never even paused to think about whether or not I believe that. So my approach is like a combination of targeted education and also just giving people the space to contemplate how they feel and contemplate their own experiences in a really like the atmosphere I create for my clients is super shame-free and non-judgmental. So you can use whatever language you want to use. For some people, it's the first time they've even spent a dedicated hour talking about sex ever. And they're like, oh, like I can talk about this stuff and like nothing happens, nothing bad happens. I can learn more about this stuff, or it feels so freeing to be able to say these things out loud. So yeah, it's for me when I'm, meeting a client for the first time, I have an intake. I ask them about themselves. I ask them about their goals for this program. Because some people might say, my goal is to begin dating. Other people might be like, I'm married. My goal is to be able to communicate better in the bedroom with my spouse of 20 years. And so based on what they say they want to accomplish, that is sort of how I focus our work together.
Can I just say that I love that because when you said like, what are your values? My initial thought was like, well, most of these people, maybe me included, like the values were placed on you, like you said, so like, I don't think I've ever, like I've probably thought more about it indirectly at this point in my life, but never have I had a conversation around that, like, so I love that you have an opportunity for people just like begin to map that out on their own. So love that.
Yeah, thank you. And I always emphasize, you don't have to share mine. I don't even like really tell you what mine are. Like, you develop your own, you're the one that has to live by them. And if you tell me like, yeah, I don't think I want to have sex until I'm in a committed, loving relationship, I'm like, great, that's great. I'm not trying to make people into like
Heathens.
I always think of the most extreme example. I'm like, I'm not trying to like prime you for a sex party and clown makeup, but if you tell me that's your thing, I will safely get you there.
Oh, I love creating a safe container for people, particularly people who are coming from a background of having no safe container for anything that's not deemed totally heteronormative, right? So I love that you're doing that for people. I think this book does this for people. I have a 14-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I was like, hey, I know you guys haven't been in purity culture, but I want you to read this book too. And so
I love that. And I love teenagers are like my favorite population of people to work with.
yeah.
I'm not raising my own, so you might be like, oh my God, you can say that because you're not raising one.
I was gonna say, I've got a couple I might start sending you here before too long. So
That is a compliment to know that you would want to share the information. It's practical.
It's information. And what's so lovely is I'm like, hey, read this and like, let's talk about it. And so we've been talking about it, all the things that come up. And it's so cool to have some kind of a tool to like talk to them about things and to bring up things, particularly not having any guidelines as a young person of how to do that, just none, right? What made you want to create this as a book, and like how did you go through the process of doing
it? So I guess I was probably 5 years into this work, and I was actually contacted by a literary agent who was like, you should write a book. I will help you create the proposal. And it happened like that. I have a really wonderful agent. Her name's Ingrid from the Bindery Agency. And she was really instrumental in getting this book off the ground. And, I'd never written a book before. It was always like my dream, my childhood dream to write a book. So it is like a really big deal for me. And I realized that I basically had all the content already, just not in any sort of coherent form. Because as I work with people, I'm creating lessons and resource guides, and I had the sexual values workbook that I wrote. And so all of that stuff, imagine like not at all organized Google Docs. That was kind of what it felt like. And then I'm like, now I'm going to put this all into a succinct product. So it was, so much of it was based on classes I'd already taught for purity culture, post-purity culture folks, lessons I'd written them. And it was just a matter of like getting it all in one place in a way that like highlighted, in my experience, the things that people ask about the most and the things that people are curious about the most. There was absolutely like a special chapter on porn. There was a special chapter on abortion, because those are two things that people come with a lot of questions about and a lot of feelings about. And then the rest of it, I'm like, we got to tell everyone the basics, like I'm breaking it down to like, this is anatomy. This is how your body works. These are how birth control methods work, because I know there's so much. At this point, there's so much misinformation on the internet and coming from the federal government about birth control, about queer identity. And I was like, if we get it in a book, they can't take this, right? Like they can delete the CDC web pages about abortion and about HIV, but they can't take this book.
I mean, they'll probably burn it at some point, but it's still right.
I totally believe that, but yeah.
Would be an honor, right? Yeah.
If it ends up on the banned book list, I mean, if they ever find out about it, I'm sure it will.
It's which I hope they do, right? I hope they absolutely do. What are you finding has been the response? Like, what are you getting from people in response to the book?
It has been overwhelmingly positive. If there are bad reviews out there, I don't read them. I took it upon myself before the book came out to talk to other authors, and they're like, don't read your own reviews. So I don't do that. But I will have people send me theirs, or friends or family send me ones they come across. And my favorite response is a lot of my friends who have read the book, they're like, Erica, it sounds just like you. Like I hear it in your voice. And it was really important to me because, this book contains some dense information. Like reading about the birth control ring and the patch and how hormones work is like not always easy reading, but I tried really hard to write it in the same tone I talk. And the tone I'm talking to you in is the same tone I talk to clients in. Like I'm just myself all the time. Like this is the same me that you're always going to get. And I tried really hard to write in a voice that felt like me. And I love when people say, oh yeah, like it's actually like kind of funny in places. And I laughed a few times and like you make some good jokes. And I'm like, yes, like I want the warmth to come through. And when I get that feedback, I'm like the most proud.
Do people tend to typically do it, like read it on their own, or are you finding people saying they're reading it, whether it's their kids, like Jenny just did, or just like with partners, or with, like what's have you heard a variety?
I think mostly people reading it on their own, but I actually have a lot of therapists who recommend my book to their therapy clients and then work through some of it in their therapy sessions. And that's another thing that I'm so honored to know that's happening. A friend of a friend is a therapist here in Philadelphia and was using my book with a client recently. And the feedback from the client was like, oh my God, I feel lighter with every page. And I'm like, when people who this book is for say that, I'm like, I know I did good. So that's the best I could get, because again, I didn't grow up in purity culture. So when the people who really did, who this book is for, give me such positive response, I'm like, that's really all that matters.
One of the things that really, I don't know, blew my mind, invited me to think about things differently, whatever, invited me to talk to my kids about things differently in this book was the sexual Bill of Rights part.
Oh, yeah.
Will you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I really love that you said that because it was important to me to include that as an appendix in my book. One of the things about purity culture is that you don't learn that you deserve to be respected other than, it's like if you have sex, you don't deserve respect at all. And so I wanted people to know that if you're a sexually active person, you actually do deserve respect. And these are all the areas that applies to. And let me flip to it actually so I can give you, it's still so crazy to me that this is my own book, honestly. So the way that I started that section is simply by virtue of being human, we are all entitled to some basic rights in regards to our sexuality. If anyone questions your rights to these things, especially a sexual partner or an institution, they are interfering with your ability to be sexually healthy. And then I remind people that your sexual partners also have these rights and that you need to respect them. So the basic rights, I'll just read a few because there's a bunch of them, but you are entitled to the right to make your own decisions about being sexual with someone or not. You are entitled to the right to make your own decisions about contraception and STI protection. You are entitled to the right to stop sexual activity at any time, including right before or even during sex. You have the right to set boundaries about your body and physical affection, and that includes with authority figures, strangers, partners, relatives. You have the right to have sexual health conversations with partners, the right to tell a partner what you would and would not like, the right to give yourself pleasure, the right to sexual autonomy and safety of your body, meaning you have the right to make decisions according to your own values and to be sexual without violence. There's a bunch more, but the reminder is that everyone is deserving of these rights, and your access to these rights should not infringe upon the rights of another. So it's really just teaching people like to be really respectful of each other in a sexual relationship. And I know that's not something that's taught when, you know, the message is that if you're married, you're entitled to your partner's body now. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be just a given, but not where we're not the state we're at right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do it now. Talk to us about the men's group that you've been doing and why start a men's group now.
Yeah. I'm so excited about the men's group. So thank you for asking. Traditionally in this work, I have never separated people by gender precisely because there's so much gender division in purity culture. It's like men and women are opposites and complementary, and you're both so mysterious to each other. So I don't ever separate my groups by gender. And I also have trans and non-binary clients. So everyone can do every program. But in this, I've just been sitting back and observing in a large part the behavior of a lot of our government officials. And I'm talking guys like Pete Hegseth, Kash Patel. I mean, Trump himself is a whole other can of worms, but like the vision of masculinity that's being presented as correct, and also coming from guys like Doug Wilson and Dale Partridge and Mark Driscoll. I'm like, I know you know these names. I
know, I was gonna say, if you don't know these names, people look them up, but just don't take the time. Yeah.
They're the kind of guys that believe that like the church is being led by effeminate men, and that's going to be the downfall of the church, and like those are actual quotes, you know. So
or that women shouldn't have the right to vote, and only there should be a vote from the household, and that comes from the man, like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So in my work, I have had the opportunity to work individually and in some of my groups with some like really fantastic men. And I don't get as many male clients as I do female clients or queer clients. And I understand why. Like, purity culture does really put the brunt of this shit on women, but also it does not leave men unscathed. So when men come to me, I'm always like so happy. And I've had wonderful conversations with men. And so I was like, I want men to be able to talk to each other about this stuff, and I want to be able to facilitate that. So the groups are called Purity Culture and Masculinity, a group for men. And I developed a curriculum that's like 8 groups long. And we're going to talk about things like masculinity, patriarchy, fatherhood, violence, body image, sex, intimacy, relationships, the things that they learned from the men around them. And, you know, the guys that I work with, they're like, this version of masculinity doesn't fit me. It never did. My dad was a certain kind of man, but I don't want to be like that. I want to have more room for vulnerability and connection and emotional intimacy with my wife or even with my friends. And so those are the issues that we're going to dig into. We had there are a couple groups of the men running concurrently, and the first one we started meeting just a couple days ago, and it was already like so cool just to introduce them to each other. There's 8 guys in this group, and immediately, like, they didn't even have to share a lot about their backgrounds to know what they were talking about. And the feedback I got already was like, it's so good to be in a group of guys where like you all know how weird my growing up was, because they all had a very similar story. And so we're joking about like all the like Christian metal bands that they were allowed to be into as young guys. And yeah, it was like the first group is really where we just kind of get to know each other and establish a level of comfort. And I feel like it's going really well.
I'm so glad that there's a men's group. I love Bell Hooks. She's really been an important part of my unfolding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is an important part of everyone's unfolding, I think, if you let her
Yeah.
be. But what she says is that the first act of patriarchal violence isn't against women. It's against men, and it's telling them that they shouldn't have the feelings, that they cannot be vulnerable, that
Yeah.
they can't do all these things. And I think, man, when we look at the landscape of men in leadership right now, you see men who can't be vulnerable, who can't admit need, who can't, and it's violence. It's violence against them.
And I
So
feel like they're all like peacocking for each other too.
yeah. Will you talk to us about inviting men back into their own vulnerability and like gentleness and their own sexuality and all those things?
Yeah, I think it's one of my friends, several of my friends who are ex-evangelicals, they told me that they think I'm a really good person to do this work because I see the best in men, and I'm not a person that's like, you know, fuck all men. I'm a misandrist. Like I'm not. I think it's really because I was raised by a wonderful father. Like my dad is fucking great, and he's one of the best people on the planet, and so he has shown me this, you know, like sort of gentle way of being a man. And so I think that's like where my starting point is just knowing that kind of thing is possible. So I really aim to create a space, whether it's with an individual man or with this men's group, where they can just be honest and be themselves and not worry about performing for other men. And your question was so beautiful, but my first reaction is that's really a long game process, and I'm not even sure how it'll unfold over the course of my 8 weeks with them, but I want to be really consistent about being like, hey, this space is for you. I am not here to judge you for any of your behaviors or any of your past. I want us all to be able to talk to each other about all of the things that you have experienced, including the ones that might feel really shameful or really hurtful. And I think one of the, like, how do I phrase this? I really like inviting people to also forgive themselves for the things they feel really bad about. So an example is like when I work with people, a lot of times they're like, well, I perpetuated purity culture too. And I said X, Y, and Z about queer people, or and they'll have these things that they did that they feel so bad about that I feel like it gets in the way of their moving forward or healing. And I wrote about that in the book too. I'm like, if you have perpetuated purity culture, and this is a thing I'll say to the men, like, sure, you may have done things acting out of the lessons that you learned, the conditioning that you were given, the patriarchal ideas of what it meant to be a man. You might have called someone the F slur before, but I need you to know that you need to forgive yourself because you were doing the best you could and you were given these messages and you were surviving in a world that required that of you. So I didn't even realize I was going to be saying that to men, but I definitely will. Now that was a really great question, Jenny. Thank you.
We just mentioned a lot of names that are showing up in kind of the toxic masculinity space. Do you have spaces that you want to highlight or that you might even point people to that are really positive forms of masculinity in culture?
Oh, this is a good question.
It's hard to think about, right? Yeah. Sadly.
I think that it's the kind of thing that I'm going to ask. I mean, I'm going to be asking the group members for their thoughts on this, if they have any guys that they think are like demonstrating really kind of kind masculinity. And I'm going to give you the first answer that popped in my mind. But for me, it's Jason Kelsey, who was a Philadelphia Eagles center. I'm in Philly. I'm a big Eagles fan, but like
Perfect, but that's okay. It's acceptable.
Okay.
I'm in Dallas, so it's just automatically bad blood, right?
Supposed rivals.
Yeah.
I know.
I don't really care about Cowboys football, but yeah.
But I'm like, he's a man that's like, NFL star, accepted unequivocally by like most men as like a man's man. He's also the father of 4 daughters, the husband to a really strong feminist woman, a guy that cries all the time. He cries publicly. And every time I'm like, oh, it shouldn't feel so radical to see, but it really does. Yeah. And everyone I know that's ever met him said he's great. So there's that.
That's a really great answer because it just checks so many boxes, right? Like you said, like the quintessential football player, like you just think big burly man, and like has like such humility to him and doesn't take himself too seriously, and also like isn't threatened by the success of his wife. I'm assuming, I don't know him personally, but like just seems to be really promoting her. The one that comes to my mind, and I've said this on the podcast probably before, but maybe if there's others that can spark off this too, that's what I was so. There was a lot of reasons I was really sad about the last election, but like last presidential election. But I felt like it was masculinity was up for grabs in that election. Like you had Tim Walz versus our current vice president.
Yeah.
Like, right. And like, just even the way they presented themselves. And again, Tim Walz, who was like up there boohooing and crying and like, all, talking about public education and all the way that it's moved, and I just felt like there's a chance for our country here to claim a different version of masculinity, much less having a woman president, but like in the midst of that, also like a salve to masculinity as well. And we just screwed the pooch. That's not a good term. That's a bad term to use. We didn't do it well.
Yeah. No, I forgot about Tim Walz for a second there, but he had, just this like fatherly energy that came across to me as like really kind and compassionate.
Erica, if we both know people that are still really trapped in purity culture and churches that promote it. In my hometown of Rockwall, Texas, there's Josh Howerton, who's a huge turd. And
I've seen his clips. I've seen some of his clips.
Yeah, that you should flee from little girls in mini skirts.
He's that guy.
He's in my hometown.
He didn't he block you, Jenny?
He blocked me. So like source of pride.
Bristol, and I've literally never interacted with him. It's like he preemptively blocked.
He knew. He was like, this gal's gonna give me trouble. But what do you, if someone is still in that space, how can you begin to invite them out of it?
Yeah. Oh, I think, okay, I have an answer, and it's really kind of percolating in my head right now, but there's a really fantastic new documentary on Netflix about a woman who became close to the women in a fundamentalist Latter-day Saints cult. Have you seen that, Jenny? It's so good. Phil, you should watch it. I forget what it's called, but the woman at the center of it, she's a cult psychologist, and she was also raised very fundamentalist Mormon, and she became friends with this group of like FLDS women and was able to help them get free of a predator. That's like the Cliff's Notes. But I was so inspired by that documentary because what she did was never judge the women and never try to change who they were. She just let them know she was someone safe that they could like get near and spend time with. And so like the cracks started to, kind of form and chip away. But I was just like so inspired by how she never was like, okay, I'm coming in here to clean up your community as an outsider. So I would say, like, if you do know somebody that is still like so deep in purity culture and your heart breaks for them because you can't pull them out. You have to wait for them. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna have any success if you're like, here, this book will teach you how to have good orgasms. Like, that is not gonna fly. You know what I mean? I know my book isn't step one. For me, it would just be like letting someone know, like, hey, I used to think this stuff too, and then I was a little unsure, and letting them know that you're a safe person to talk to. That's, I think, the best approach, not bulldozing in and trying to change their minds. just letting them know, like, yeah, I'm an outlet, I'm a lifeline. If you ever, if you ever get hurt in this way, or if you ever feel really bad, or if you have a lot of questions about things that you don't have anyone to ask, like, let them know that you can be that person for them.
Is it called Trust Me, the False Prophet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
I just watched it. Holy.
Did you?
Yes.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I love that, Erica, because it's about, when you heal yourself. Richard Rohr says, if you don't transform your pain, you transmit it.
Mm.
And also, when you heal your stuff, you transmit that too.
Yeah.
When you've walked through these things, you can really be an invitation, an open heart, an open mind, open arms to someone else who is still in the thick of it, It matters that we do our own work for ourselves, for sure, because we are deserving of love and care and sex and all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And it also matters for everybody else. It matters for everybody else because it shows people a different pathway forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Man, we could just keep going because this is so lovely.
Well, can I ask this real quick?
Yeah.
Oh, what I was going to say? I was just going to say it's so nice talking to you guys. And like, do it again in a heartbeat. It's just like...
Well, again, we've had 7 episodes on purity culture, so we'll probably bring you back. Let's be honest here. But
we have so many problems so let's keep talking.
Well, I do want to maybe kind of closing question here. So our season, really, this season has been kind of on this idea of reciprocity, and clearly we can identify and talk about ad nauseum the negative aspects of purity culture. So will you just highlight, in the same way we were highlighting some of the positive images in society, like highlight some of the real benefits of what a healthy sexuality looks like for people? And that may be obvious, or maybe I think that it's obvious, but maybe people who are so lost in it don't even know.
Yeah. I think, when people think about, your questions are always so good that they just bring up so many thoughts in me right away, and they're all like fighting to come out. I think there's this idea or accusation of people that deconstruct purity culture sometimes, that you just want to be out there having sex. You just want to get all this pleasure. You're just trying to be sinful. And like, pleasure, physical pleasure, sexual pleasure is obviously a very important part of sexuality, but it's not everything. And I think that the benefit to having a healthy relationship with your sexuality is just ease and comfort. Where if you're being raised in and affected by purity culture ideals, I think sexuality feels like this big. You can't really see my arms, but I'm like, it's huge. It's taking up all this space. But if you have sort of healed your relationship to your sexuality and to your own desire, and with your own body, and you're working on that, it begins to shrink, and then it's just something that like runs in the background. So healing from purity culture and having a healthy relationship to your sexuality, it can really, to me, like it's empowerment, it's relaxation, it's comfort, it's ease, it's joy. And it's like, you can be authentically you without worrying, am I following all of these rules all the time? Because you're not checking in with your accountability group or your youth pastor. You're checking in with yourself and your partners. Like, am I living in a way that I'm respecting my partners, showing care and concern for my partners? Like, that's the important check-in, is like, does this feel good to you and the other people that you are interacting with, if you're interacting with somebody? That to me is the big plus.
Okay, one more question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because there's a lot of bad news in the world, where are you finding beauty currently?
Oh, my dogs.
Oh, yes.
I am a dog mom, cat mom. I have 2 dogs and 3 cats currently. Often the ratio comes and goes, as pets come and go, but there's also nature. I mean, I grew up in a tiny little town in the mountains of Pennsylvania. So even though I live in Philadelphia, when it comes down to it, I'm a small town country girl at heart. I'm going to show you my dog, actually. I don't know if anyone else will see this, but there's one of my dogs.
Is that a healer?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Goose is one of my dogs. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the first. I feel like my dogs are divine. And the relationship I have with animals is divine.
Amen.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Friends, we encourage you to check out the Purity Culture Recovery Guide. It's super great. If you are trying to recover, trying to heal, it's a super lovely thing. If you have teenagers, it's a super lovely thing to sit with them and go through this thing. Super helpful, super wonderful. Erica, where can folks find your work, and what do you have coming up that you would like for people to know about?
Thank you. One thing I'll add to your promo of my book is that there is an audiobook version, and I know some people prefer to listen, or some people might feel more comfortable if they're not carrying the book around, depending on what their life is like. So audiobook can also be really good for some people. You can find my work at purityculturedropout.com. It's pretty easy to remember, or if you Googled the terms Erica Smith sex education, it'll all come up for you. I spend more time than I should on Instagram. That's the main platform I use. My account on Instagram is Erica Smith Educates. And I'm also on Threads. But if you would like to work with me in any capacity, that is my website is how I prefer to be contacted, because DMs aren't reliable. And as far as what I have coming up, the men's groups are in full swing already, but I will be enrolling again this year for my divorce support group. And that is a group for people that were married in purity culture and had good Christian marriages, and now their marriages are ending or they're over, and you're like, I don't know how to date. I don't know how to be. I don't know how to talk to people about this. Those groups are really fantastic, I will say. I say that not because I'm talking about myself, but the people in the groups, the people that join the groups are so cool. So I would say look for that coming up. And in the meantime, I'm always open to having individual clients.
Well, Erica, thank you for your time and for the work that you're doing. Clearly so important and needed, and just grateful for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being a part of the Radical Sacred community.
In these uncertain times, may you cling to hope and deep connection, and may you work towards living in a spirit of reciprocity with all beings.
Our lovely intro and outro music is Beach Song by the band Saren.
And it's just the two of us here at Radical Sacred, so please help us out by sharing with your friends, rating and reviewing us. Find more of our work on Substack and Instagram.
Remember, you are on sacred ground. Stay rooted.